Welcome, ILEETA members. We are here for a brand new edition of ILEETA Live. We have, look at this. We have Joe. Joe had some technical issues here, and we got him back. So our special guest tonight is Chip Huth, and myself, Todd Fletcher, and Joe Willis are happy to have Chip, who has had an amazing life and a very successful and continued successful career. So for those that don't know Chip, go ahead and tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thanks a lot, Brian, and Joe and Todd. Thanks for having me. So what is there to tell? I'm married. My wife, Shelly, is a sergeant with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and she's got a few more years to go till retirement. I have a 16-year-old stepson at home who just started his junior year in high school. I have two grown sons, Christopher and Brandon. Christopher lives in Kansas City here, and Brandon splits time between Dallas and Africa currently, where he works. And I served in the U.S. military, in the Army. 21 became a cop. I did 30 years in law enforcement, primarily in the SWAT teams. I had the privilege of serving at every level, from point man and unit trainer all the way to Special Operations Division commander. Before I retired in January of 22 from the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And I now work full-time for the Arbinger Institute. I get to travel the world doing executive coaching, content creation, facilitation around leadership. And it's just a rush. I really enjoy doing it. And that's me in a nutshell.
That's you in a nutshell. Just a quick clarification on something you said there. Is it Missouri or Missouri?
Well, it depends on where you're from. I think most people, including my wife, say Missouri. Down home, we tend to say Missouri. And then down by New Madrid, down in the Boot Heel, there are a segment of folks that say Missouri. And
I haven't heard that one.
No, you haven't, because you probably haven't been down in that area. Those folks are kin down there. So my understanding is just ways to say it, and I'm just a product of being partially raised, I should say. I was rescued and taken off the streets, and then worked on a farm down in central Missouri for several years. And that's just the first time I heard it. Somebody said Missouri, I think. So it's stuck.
Stuck with you. Yeah. Good. Joe, we've been chatting a little bit before we went live, and you had some technical issues. We'll let you start off with the first comment you have for Chip.
Yeah. So, man, I've got so many, and I don't even really know where to begin, but I'm just going to jump straight into it. One of the things I think I most well know you for, most do, is that TEDx talk and the story of that just unconditional respect. And really, that's, I feel like what you've kind of built so much of your reputation around. If you can, just kind of, for those that haven't seen the TED Talk, can you give it to us in a thumbnail sketch?
Yeah. By the way, people bring that talk up, and it is on record as the worst talk I've ever given. And I was hoping only my mother would see it, and maybe other people. I haven't checked recently, but I think more than my mother has seen it. But the story behind that story is I melted down. I'm really used to speaking. Actually, people don't know this about me. I probably never even talked about it, but I actually have a fear of public speaking. And the way I overcame it was by leaning into it and attacking it, by just throwing myself in the arena. And for some reason that night, I got so focused on how I looked to the audience that I forgot about the audience. I forgot that I was there to share a message, and I got super nervous. And people that know me well, they watch that video and they're like, "Oh man, you look like a caged tiger," and trying to use note cards and all of this. But I managed to get it out. I mean, enough so that I've had a lot of positive feedback on the message itself. So no matter how bad I tried, I had messed up totally. But I learned a big lesson that night, and that is just throw yourself on the audience and trust them to catch you. Don't get so wrapped up in thinking about you. Think about why you're there. And of course, I've seen you, obviously, Joe, be able to master that at the Emerson Hour and speaking engagements. You've been a good example for me. But the story itself is really fantastic. Actually, it's kind of a reinvention of myself by virtue of the book that was done. I was very transparently, I was really dropping the ball at work and at home. Multiple areas of my life weren't going well. I was put in charge of the SWAT team that was floundering. They were doing great when it comes to kicking doors and switching in the nation when it comes to but they were creating a lot of havoc in their wake, a lot of community complaints, lawsuits, settlements, that type of thing. And so I was sent there with an edict to kind of clean the team up, sent in almost as a hatchet man. And, I got there and I started doing the only thing I knew how to do as a leader, which was close distance fly force. Just come down on people really hard, and just made things worse. And people were doing what I said when I was standing over them, but when I was gone, they did whatever they wanted. And you can't be everywhere at once, as a leader. So that was going on, failing at work. And then at home, I was deconstructing my second marriage, looking upstairs, and my wife's living downstairs. We're in the process of going through a divorce. Kids were years at the time. They wouldn't speak. So there's like a perfect failures. And so I was at an airport, Denver International Airport. I get grounded. And I'm looking for a bookstore because I love to read. And I come across this bookstore, tattered cover, and I find Leadership and Self-Deception. And I love the title because I was like, okay, leadership, I'm really stinking that up. Self-deception, I understood to be a philosophical paradox that had plagued thinkers for thousands of years. And so you've got these two things together, and plus the book was thin. So I'm like, I'm all in. I buy the book. And I read the book, and I'm like, this book's amazing. It tells me what's wrong with every person in my life and doesn't agree with me. Like, I totally missed the point. I didn't see myself in the book at all. I didn't see myself in the problems I was creating, so I went back and started handing it out to people, trying to fix them. That failed miserably. Finally, my future co-author and dear friend, Jack Colwell, invited me to a workshop. And in that workshop, they basically unpacked the contents of that book for me. And now, through that discussion and through his patience with me, I began to see myself actually in the work, in the book. And I was like, oh, wow, they wrote this for me. I'm this person who's self-deceived. I'm this person who's making good words. And to condense this story, I basically became convinced that, we as a team needed to embrace this philosophy that was encapsulated in this book. And, it was fits and starts, one step forward, two steps forward, one step back. We finally put our focus into adopting this philosophy, not only in the way I was leading, but the way the team was operating. It ended up going from a really troubled team, most complained team on the entire department, to eliminating complaints in the community, while at the same time tripling the results we had in terms of felony arrests, money seizures, drug seizures, gun seizures. So unheard of results while eliminating complaints. I didn't think that was even possible. No complaints, no lawsuits for a decade. And it was just an amazing turnaround. The only thing that changed was the way we were with people in our work. We still did all the stuff you have to do as a law enforcement officer on the sharp end. But that was such a great turnaround for me. And it didn't only change my work life, it changed my home life too. I didn't really come around in time to resuscitate my marriage. So I ended up getting divorced. I think what my wife at the time said was too little too late. And, I appreciate that. I looking at it from her perspective, I could totally understand it. But my kids that are grown men now, we rebuilt our relationship, and all of that happened again because of me reading a book that I didn't understand at first. And then my good friend Jack helping to explain it to me and help me see myself in it. And then the next thing you know, I'm adapting this to my leadership efforts at work and at home. And man, I don't even, when I say reinvent myself, I feel like I got a second chance at life. And the results, I think the cool part is, like, if it was just some program where, oh, well, you're just always nice to people, or you let people run over you, or you're indulgent, that would be like, that's what people assume, right? Like, well, if you're being kind or compassionate, you're clearly going to be soft. Man, it's not that at all. As expressed by the results that we got, in terms of the enforcement piece. But I learned a ton of lessons through that process, and I credit that book and my affiliation with that organization now, the Arbinger Institute, with saving my life in so many ways. So that's the short story.
No, that's a phenomenal story. Thanks for kind of, like I said, the thumbnail sketch. But what I appreciated out of it was you actually went a little bit more into the personal background, which is something I have always appreciated about you as a speaker, as a presenter, and even in just our interactions with one another, is your genuine authenticity and willingness to push into that space of candor that some struggle with. I'll follow on with a question, then turn it over to the others. Is that something that kind of came later in this discovery process, or is that something you've always had kind of a relationship with? Is that authenticity and self-awareness?
No, yeah, great question. No, the short answer is no. I've not always. Matter of fact, there were so many times I put on a mask, like I put on a face to meet people. I did not want them to see me. As a matter of fact, if I'm honest, I was probably terrified of them seeing me. So I built myself into a very formidable person, physically, mentally. I wasn't going to be taken advantage of in any way. And I was afraid to let that guard down. And it caused a lot of problems, obviously, in my personal relationships, but also in my work relationships. There are still people, Joe, that they won't forgive me for who I was. And that's been, well over 15 years ago now. And I have to live with that. But the truth is that when I was a kid, I was abused in all kinds of ways, abandoned on the street, things of that nature. And I just became very insecure, and I didn't want to be victimized. I thought the way to do that was to be tough, in people's eyes. And so the authentic me never really showed itself until I started working with Arbinger and actually trying to share this philosophy in meaningful ways with people. And what I realized was I was getting in the way of that by not being transparent. I was getting in the way of that by coming to them like I was a prophet who had figured all this stuff out, when the truth was I'm struggling right along with them. And I continue to struggle today. And what I figured out was, look, they're only going to go as deep as you're willing to go. And if you're not willing to be honest about your struggles and willing to be honest about your doubts and your skepticism and all the things you struggle with, then there's no way you can ask someone else to do that. So I kind of stumbled upon this fact, right, by watching some of my mentors who were willing to do that, willing to give of themselves in that way. And I've been trying. There's still times I haven't perfected it, honestly. There are times when, that insecurity will rear its head, and I won't be honest with feedback, or I'll hold back when I probably should share, or I'll share when I should probably zip it. There are times when, maybe I'm saying something and I hear myself saying it, and I know I'm just saying it to impress somebody. Like, I'm really not saying it to be helpful, right? I'm thinking, well, if I throw this analogy in there, they're going to think I'm really smart. And I'm getting better at recognizing it and surrounding myself with people who call me on it, which is really helpful. But yeah, to your point, that's it. If I'm really wanting to help people, then I have to be, as you said, authentic. And I think I was authentic back in the day too. I was just authentically a jerk. So,
well, thank you.
One of the things that a few months back, I was listening to the Virtual Academy podcast. Michael Warren was interviewing you, and you went into your background and a more deep dive into the personal relationships and how it affected your personal relationships. And so anybody is interested, there's another resource out there with Virtual Academy podcast that you did that was absolutely outstanding. And so I think that first off, I want to say thank you for sharing that message. You're a very accomplished person, and yet very humble at the same time. And I think that is a good example for us all. So,
thank you, Todd.
But one of the things I wanted to ask was what led up to, or what was the decision-making process, what led up to the book, The Power of Unconditional Respect, and what epiphanies did you have, or aha moments did you have that took you there?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So Jack Colwell and I actually co-authored Unleashing the Power of Unconditional Respect in 2010. And really the first thing, so I've always had a passion, as you gentlemen know, for, officer safety and defensive tactics and that type of training. That's been my bailiwick. And what I realized was, in talking to a bunch of officers, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but I had a tactical timeout for a while. I actually got sent to the academy by the chief after a couple of critical incidents, and I had the opportunity to become the first non-degreed academy instructor in the history of the Kansas City, Missouri Regional Police Training Academy. But I did 4 years there as a defensive tactics trainer, and firearms as well. But all they let me do at the range was like inspect the guns and clean them and maybe be a range officer. Like, I don't claim to be any, we all know some masterful firearms instructors. I don't claim to be one of them. I got the t-shirt, but so most of my time, 95% spent on the mats, doing that type of stuff. But what I noticed in doing, I reviewed every use of force report on the entire department. I had a database I created. When we started an in-car video, back then it was VHS tapes. You guys remember that, when you locked the VHS tapes in the trunk? And it was, for those young officers listening, it was back in the caveman days, right? When it was, so I review all these tapes, and I noticed this pattern of officers simply overlooking danger cues. There were clear signs, like pre-assault indicators, that the subjects on these videos were demonstrating on these car stops that the officers were missing. And I knew they were trained. I mean, I trained them. We spent a lot of time, talking to them about these pre-assault indicators, and they're just missing them, and things people would say and the officers would ignore. And these were things we trained on. Like, for instance, suspect would say something like, "Hey, officer, I'm not going to jail today." And we trained, when someone says that, that should right away key you, to call for backup, to start trying to de-escalate and wait till you get some more people there, because they've told you their intention, right? And the officers would respond. So you'd have a subject say, "I'm not going to jail tonight." And the officer would respond, "Hey, we'll talk about that in a minute. It's okay. It's okay. Just go and put your hands behind your back," and they'll just lead into the arrest. And next thing you know, they're getting tossed. And of course, we're sitting here watching this on the video, and some of these were life-endangering assaults that were happening to our officers, and gun grabs and things of that nature. And we're like, what is happening that they're not recognizing these things? And what we realized was it was the same thing that was happening that was driving a lot of the discourtesy complaints. It wasn't a tactical issue. It wasn't a behavioral issue. They knew the right behaviors. We trained them on the right behaviors. We trained them what to say. We trained them what to watch for. It was literally the way they were showing up in these interactions, the way they were regarding the people they were dealing with. So the idea was, like, here I am, this well-trained police officer, and I've stopped this 16-year-old kid. And instead of seeing him as a person first, a person with the full range of potential that every human being has, I reduced him to his age. I reduced him to a small segment of his identity, and I was dealing with him as just a juvenile. And of course, here I am, an officer training 6 days a week, got 7 years of experience. This guy's no threat to me. And it's like putting on a set of blinders, and then all of my training goes out the window. Or I'm dealing with an elderly person. Well, there's not a lot of targets at the range with grandpa and grandma on them. And, we got all these biases we carry around, and the officers are like ignoring the same danger cues that almost all humans give off. We've generalized these enough that people have seen these, and, rocking back and forth, clenching their teeth, rolling their shoulders, yawning, stretching, all of those things, right past them. And it was because they weren't recognizing the humanity of the person in front of them. They weren't seeing this person as a person first. They did not have unconditional regard for their humanity. And it's like, wow. So you start realizing this, and you're like, well, how do we communicate this? Because there really isn't a textbook for it. And then we go back to Arbinger's work. And, you know, at first I thought about Arbinger only in terms of the interpersonal stuff. Like, sure, seeing someone as a person, that's really important if you want them to trust you. And it's really important if you want to communicate with them authentically. But what did it have to do with safety? It turns out everything. Mm-hmm. When I see you as a person, not only does it make me interpersonally more effective, it also makes me not devalue your threat potential. And I put a lot of emphasis on that because that's what gets us killed. The first thing we do is objectify someone. And once we see them as less than human, that's when our biases we all carry, flood us. And they distort all our perception and they undermine all our training. And so, like, my side of the book, right, when I jumped up on it was, look, we've got to be able to talk about this in a way that helps keep officers alive or keep them from getting career-ending injuries. And you know, how do, you know, this is the issue, right? Well, Jack and I put our heads together, start talking about it. We start drafting out a couple chapters. Then we realize, look, a lot of what's leading to these assaults in the first place is not only the devaluation of their humanity, it's the devaluation of their humanity, but it's not only manifesting and compromising their safety from a tactical perspective, it's also manifesting the way they communicate with people. It's like I have contempt and disgust just dripping off of me, and I may be saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, or yes, sir, and no, sir, but they're not responding to what I'm saying or doing. They're responding to how they're feeling seen by me while I'm saying or doing it. And so Jack and I put our heads together and thought, how can we capture this in a book and share it with people in a way that's accessible? I don't know that we actually achieve that. I don't know. You know, I read the book, you know, I look back into the book, I'm thinking there's so many things we would do different, right? Like we started a second edition like 3 or 4 times, but our schedules take us in different directions. And you know how it is. Once you memorialize it, you're always like, man, if I could come back. And of course, now we've got all of these people that are doing all of this great work in that domain. You know, the left of bang stuff that you get, that you have out there. I don't know if we're still streaming.
Oh, we certainly are. Well, are we? It says live up here in the corner, and if it's because we're fixated on you and none of us are moving, it's because we're eating, we're soaking this up, and I genuinely believe everyone else is. There is so much value in everything you've just shared with us.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree.
Or did
Chip maybe we lost him?
Oh no!
Uh-oh. Well, so, I gotta tell you, I was enthralled with what he was saying because I mean, talk about throwing down some wisdom nuggets one right after another. Yeah, that was absolutely true. I look back on my career, and what he was describing was exactly me, probably more so in the middle of my career than at the beginning of my career. And it wasn't until I heard his message delivered that it kind of changed me and how I interacted with people. So very powerful. Oh, what's that, Brian?
Crickets or something, maybe in Chip's side? I'm not sure. Oh, we got your audio. Your video was froze up.
My video was froze up.
Yeah,
but you have my audio.
Yeah, we got your beautiful face here.
It's actually a good picture. So when I freeze on camera, it does not look like you do right now. So don't worry about it. In fact, you look like an avatar.
He kind of does, yeah.
Well, I apologize. I don't know what happened there. Are you guys getting an echo?
A little bit of one.
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn this way down. All right. I just want to be able to hear you. I can't see you guys on the screen.
This is a first.
Yeah, this is the first.
I don't know what's going on with that. Well, if you can hear me,
we can keep on going.
Yeah,
we got your picture here, and we know who we're talking to. So,
and you had us absolutely enthralled. So, if you can kind of pick up from there with because I was saying that was me in the middle of my career, right? My nonverbal communication got me in more trouble than anything that I ever said, and it wasn't until later that learned from you and from some others what I was doing wrong that kind of got me back on the right path and later third of my career. So um, if you could share more with and know where you left off, we'd say have
And
at it.
you were really starting to get after that objectifying piece, right? Like seeing people as the object and making those initial determinations. And I think you mentioned it. We all fall prey to that, but I think Todd kind of hit the nail on the head with the certain point where you come in and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, want to serve and change the world, and then you start to eventually kind of wear down and kind of round out the edges a little bit, and some of that polish starts to fall off. And I think that, personally speaking, that's kind of where I noticed it after a few years of just dealing with stuff and starting to objectify. And it's kind of different from the military law enforcement perspective, but it still happens. And I guarantee you all dealt with it a lot more than I did. So if you want to pick up there, we'd love to hear what else you have to say.
Yeah, you still have me on audio?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Here.
All right, I'm getting a bit of an echo, but if you guys aren't getting it, I'll just work through it. Yeah, well, as I mentioned, that not only was that happening at work and the consequences that entailed with the community, like on the, from the outside. Hold on a second. That is really distracting.
Hey, Chip, I can kick you off, and if you want to join back in with that link, we can.
Yeah,
three of us can talk.
Let's try that. I apologize.
Hey, no worries.
I may join in from my phone, even, Brian.
Okay, I'll just kick you off, and then just hit that link again, and hopefully we can. I'm sure it'll work better.
All right, thanks, brother.
You bet.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, Todd, as you were saying, and I think we all kind of agree. There's actually quite a bit of research on that. In addition to what Chip was just offering, when we have these elements of social distance and we start looking at each other as the object, I think one of the things that we need to take into account is that oftentimes the uniform is looked at as that object, and the person wearing the uniform is looked at as that object. The profession sees it when something happens 3,000 miles away. The ripple effect immediately lands right in that small town or wherever, where now that the profession is being objectified. And my next question for Chip was going to be kind of take us in that direction where. What role does that play? Because we know it's happening. And so I don't know how much of the question you heard, Chip, was oftentimes members of the profession are objectified by the public. Just as you were just saying, we have our biases. The public has theirs. They see the uniform, they see the news, and they start to make assumptions.
Yeah.
Talk us through. I know there's some nuggets that you've already shared in the book and talks, but from your perspective, what can we be doing that kind of wears off that image?
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, it's what ends up happening, I think, is that this is like a negative feedback loop. So the police feel objectified by the public. They feel reduced to a function. And then they respond to what they're feeling from the public, right? They respond to that treatment they're getting by walling up, by circling the wagons, by objectifying the public in turn. And then that cycle just feeds on itself. And the answer, in my estimation, is to break the cycle, which means what? Well, which means either the people in the public that are objectifying the police need to change, or the police need to change. And what I mean by that, well, we obviously aren't going to stop enforcing the law. We obviously aren't going to stop doing our jobs. We're not going to stop doing the things we were sworn to do. But what would it look like if we could find ways to give people a different person to respond to behind that badge? Meaning, if I'm using the mistreatment that I'm feeling at the hands of the public as an excuse for mistreating them, that never ends. That cycle will never end. At that point, the only thing I can do is sit around and wait for someone else to change. And I may tell you I want them to change, but honestly, what I really want them to do when I'm in that mindset, I want them to keep doing the thing they're doing so that I can feel justified for blaming them. That's what I want. And I'll do things to invite that. So here's what I've been thinking about is I've been talking to people about this. We can't turn this thing around overnight. But just like with my team, what we learned is that every contact with every person matters, regardless of the context, right? Regardless of if it's an arrest or just a situation where you're trying to help folks, maybe change a tire on the side of the road or take a walk-in report or a communication specialist answering the phone or answering a 911 call or a dispatcher sending someone, somewhere to answer a call. Every contact is an opportunity to build or destroy trust. And if we approach it that way, what ends up happening is all of those contacts aggregate. And next thing you know, the public starts getting a different perception of the police. They start having living examples right in front of them that contradict their biases and their preconceptions. Like, hey, I thought all cops were jerks, but man, Todd showed up here and he listened to me. He let me vent. He took down my version of the story. He didn't give me everything I wanted. I mean, he still took my brother to jail, but he was decent to him when he did it. Yeah. He didn't disrespect him, right? He didn't talk down to him. He didn't condescend to him. If we're sitting around, in my opinion, waiting for other people to do the thing that we're perfectly capable of doing, which is simply turn toward them, let ourselves be influenced by their humanity. We've already shown it doesn't make us less safe. It makes us more safe. Yeah. We've already shown it doesn't make us less or more likely to be run over or taken advantage of. It makes us less likely to be taken advantage of. I most need to be taken advantage of when I need to feel justified for mistreating people. And I got to be honest with you, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. It's the reason that I promoted within the organization to executive commander. I found myself criticizing, high-ranking commanders from a tactical position. I was criticizing them because I felt like people are coming to work. Peace officers and professional staff members of these agencies are coming to work every day. They're feeling put upon and objectified by their command staff, by their managers, and then they're being asked to go out and deal with a public who, quite frankly, when we meet members of the public, they're generally in crisis. They're generally not in their right mind. And so what has to happen in all of this is leaders, we have to step up. We have to be able to regard our people in the organization the same way we want them to be able to regard people in the community writ large. And that's the biggest challenge. So, I mean, you can tell I've got a lot to say about that. My thoughts are a little bit scattered on it, but this idea is, yes, it's true. People are people. Sometimes people are not going to be at their best, but I am a paid professional. I am trained, prepared, and equipped to deal with crisis. I am trained, prepared, to equipped to deal with difficult people. Difficult people are my business. And if I can get my mind around that and recognize, be able to just simply have a bit of compassion and consideration, doesn't mean that I give people what they want, but I'm certainly capable of giving them what they need in terms of a peace officer who's going to show up and police people, not problems, if that makes sense.
So many light bulbs went off on what you just said. I think you have a perfect example for our audience, the cops out there listening that have never heard about this before. But there was an example involving a baby bottle. And if you could kind of briefly tell us about the baby bottle. And I'm curious to know, did that change perceptions of everybody that was in that, the non-law enforcement folks that you were dealing with? Did that change their perceptions, do you think?
Yeah, it's so funny that you bring that story up because we actually wrote about that story, but it's one of hundreds of stories. Like we could have picked, all kinds of examples of people on my team simply being responsive to the humanity of other people. that example just seems to stick with people because it's so counterintuitive. It was to me. So I'll give you the short version of the story. We were serving a search warrant. My SWAT team was for the homicide unit. They were looking for a couple of homicide suspects. And, as often we do in law enforcement, at least back in the day, we got a drug buy in order to get a warrant to get into the house to get to get after these suspects. And so we do the recon. We've got eyes on. They can't get close because they've got people, lookouts on the block, so they got a long eye on the place. And they're calling it out to us, and it looks like business as usual. What we didn't know was that the lady of the house was actually running a unlicensed daycare out of that house, and nobody knew. The undercover buys were at night. The warrant was going to be done during the day because they saw the target show up there. So we don't know this. We hit this house. We come in, flashbangs, the whole 9 yards. We bust into the front room, and there are probably 20 kids in this place on top of, I couldn't tell you how many adults. People were running. We had one suspect run upstairs with a gun. We're splitting our team off. We're calling in trailers. I've got kid hanging on my leg. That game you play with your kids when they're little where you walk around with them clinging to your leg? I've got that happening, and I'm in a transition area trying to move the kid out of there, put them behind me for cover. I can't cover down. This is total chaos. So if for law enforcement that's listening, you can just imagine the mess this was, right? And so we get everything under control. Much credit to my team for having the discipline they had. We get both the suspects detained. We've got everybody else kind of pushed into this like dining room area with a couple of couches, and we've got them all seated. And there's crying babies. There's moms are upset. The ladies who were taking care of the kids, they're upset. And I'm trying to explain to them why we're there, and the screaming is so loud that I can't get my words out. And so I'm like, well, I look around for my point man. Bob Evans is his name. Great guy. I just saw Bob in the gym the other day on the weight pile. His beard's almost as glorious as yours. Almost as glorious as yours there. Almost. So I go, I'm looking for Bob. I can't find him. So I walk into the kitchen, and I see Bob standing at the sink. And he's in full tactical gear. He hasn't dressed down yet. And I'm like, what's he doing? He's starting to search already. We haven't even ran the video camera through there. And I'm assuming he's searching. And so I walk up beside him, and I look down, and he's mixing baby bottles. He's got Similac out, and he's making these baby bottles at the sink. And I look at him, and Bob is as hard as woodpecker lives. Like, this is like, he's not a soft guy. And I look at him, and he looks at me, he kind of smiles and shrugs. And he takes the baby bottles out, and he starts handing them out to the ladies who are taking care of these children. And I mean, the whole situation immediately changes. Like, people calm down. I can come out there and communicate. We got people cooperating. We're calling parents to come get kids. It just starts running really smoothly in the wake of Bob doing this one small thing. Simply, it's a gesture that simply took into account the humanity of the people in the room. He was able to be compassionate and actually do something to move the needle on the situation. And the reason to this day, I'll tell you, the reason that things got so much smoother was Bob did exactly what we were talking about. He gave these folks a different person to respond to. Whatever their idea was about the police, maybe they never even met a police officer, but we came through that door hard and fast and loud and scary. So if that was their first interaction with a police officer, it was terrifying. And Bob, by a simple act of compassion, which was predicated on seeing them as people and asking himself that question, in this scenario, what can I do to make things incrementally better? And he thought of the thought of making baby balls. Can you imagine if I would have came into that SWAT team, into the team room one night and said, hey guys, we're going to do some hip pocket training. Tonight, we're going to learn how to make baby bottles. Like, they would have laughed me out of the room, right? There's no manual for that. But here's the thing. Once their mindset shifted collectively as a team, and they started regarding the people we were dealing with as human beings first and everything else second, ideas like that, like making baby bottles, bringing in car seats, nailing doors back together when we were leaving single women at these houses by themselves, things they weren't required to do or trained to do, they began doing spontaneously. And people want to know how they went from most complained on squad to no complaints, one contact at a time. That's how they did it. And that is one of my favorite stories because I love Bob, and he's an awesome guy. But he was probably one of the most resistant people and the whole team when I first started introducing these ideas. He was just kind of a very black and white. There's good guys and bad guys, and he liked life that way. It was simple and easy, but he embraced the complexity, and he led by example. He's a shining example to me, and I still consider him a role model. So
powerful example of just human nature, something positive to do, and hopefully change perceptions of everybody in there.
Yeah, it did. And not just everybody in there either. I would say everybody on the team, the detectives that showed up, it's so funny when you have the detectives come to you. And I remember, I won't say his last name, but his first name was Aaron. And Aaron was an upfront. He did interrogations, things of that nature when you get these suspects down there in the box, if you will. And I remember Aaron coming to my office. And he knocks on the door. He comes in and sits down. And he's one of the funniest guys you ever want to meet. He's retired now too, but he was real serious. And he said, "Hey, Chip," he goes, "Listen, I don't know what you guys are doing differently." He goes, "But before we would take these people down, when we take them out of the detention area into the interview room, all they wanted to talk about was how bad you guys treated them. Now they're talking about the case. Now they're flipping. Now they're talking, they're giving us information. They're cooperating." He goes, it's just, the whole thing is, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Yeah. And that was a real big kind of boost for me, because I was thinking, wow, that's an unintended consequence. Like, I didn't see that coming. But now they can actually focus on the reason they're actually down there in the first place. And they don't have, we removed from them part of that justification they had for resisting the police, for objectifying us, right? We removed it by giving them a different experience with us. It's all based on, again, this fundamental idea of seeing people as people, first and foremost. It sounds simple, but there's so much wrapped up in it, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to butcher this rendition of it because you did far better explaining it at Emerson Hour, when, quite frankly, a couple of you came back and saved us for Emerson Hour a few years ago at the ILEETA conference, when you kind of, hey, can you cover this really quick? I don't have time to get enough speakers and that sort of thing. Your presentation, though, that paint a masterpiece, right? That what we send out is what we reflect, and we get one opportunity to paint that masterpiece on the public. Every interaction, that one by one, and you said it yourself just a second ago, each individual contact. And, that's a tremendous example. I want to visit with Jason's question because I think it's a phenomenal one. And then I'd like to come back and ask another question if I can.
So Jason Durr, our friend up north in Canada, he said, "I know you're on the phone, hard to read, but I'll read it for you. Chip, I also picked up a book to read on a recent vacation. Imagine my surprise when the first chapter of The Outward Mindset was your story. Can you tell us how that concept of an outward mindset and unconditional respect connect to each other?"
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that question, by the way, and thanks for picking up the book. That's outstanding. So basically, the fundamental premise, the outward mindset, is simply this: I can show up in the world in two different ways, primarily. In one way, I experience myself as a person among objects. Everybody around me, they're just like bit players in my story. I don't see them as people so much as a means to an end, perhaps. For instance, the way that I used to see my people when I led them, I saw them as chess pieces on a board to be manipulated to my ends. If I needed to accomplish a mission, I knew a person that had a skill set, I could move them anywhere on the board. If somebody fell off, no problem, they were replaceable. I did not appreciate the full range of their humanity. You could say I objectified them. I reduce them from a person to an object. When I show up in the world that way, we call that an inward mindset. Inward because I'm completely self-absorbed. It's all about me. And I experience the world differently when I'm inward. People, they're not full people, not in every sense of the word. They're like two-dimensional representations of people, perhaps, that I interact with. And of course, I can't then be ultimately effective interacting in that way with that inward mindset. Now, this isn't malevolent. I think all of us at one point or another have experienced this. I know I have. Matter of fact, I think there are some days I wake up inward. You know, I wake up with that mindset. I don't know what happened, right? I'm just that way. And I've gotten better at more quickly recognizing it, but I haven't perfected staying out of that mindset, that inward mindset. Now, conversely, there's the outward mindset, which leads into your question. The outward mindset simply means that I actually recognize people as people, which means what? Every person I meet, I recognize that as a human being, they have needs, hopes, fears, dreams, objectives, concerns. I'm driving on the highway trying to get to work. Guess what? All those people around me are driving on the highway trying to get somewhere. At some fundamental level of analysis, we're the same. We look different, we act different, we share different values, we have different cultures, but at some fundamental level, we're the same. And that level is we all have things that are important to us, things that matter to us, and we all have things we feel we need to accomplish in this world. And so once I recognize that core truth about people, I can start making decisions in reality, not some virtual reality I've created in my head where I'm the only person on the stage. So with an outward mindset, I see people as counting like I count, meaning what? Meaning that at that fundamental level, we're the same. We're two things at once. We're individuals, but we're also a community of human beings. And so the outward mindset just simply allows me to respect the humanity of all the people around me and all that entails. And then I make my decisions predicated on that. Now, to come full circle on your question, unconditional respect is how this often manifests at a behavior level. What we're talking about with inward and outward mindset, that's deeper than behavior. I could have an inward mindset and do something nice for you, only to manipulate you. I could have an inward mindset and do something hard to you, behaviorally, to abuse you or to mistreat you. But I can have an outward mindset and do something kind for you, human to human. It has a completely different impact. Or I can have an outward mindset and do something harsh to you, like arrest you, take you to jail, use force if I have to. And again, it lands completely differently because it's predicated on my sincere, authentic view of you as a person. Unconditional respect means respect not predicated on anything you do. It's unconditional respect for your humanity. And it manifests behaviorally by me not compromising my reactionary gap, by me taking proper cover, not jumping a call without my backup, by me speaking to you as if you were a human being, not condescending to you or cursing you out or using my public office to abuse you or to punish you. You know, how many times when I was a young officer do I remember people thinking, well, look, if they're a jerk to us, we'll write them more tickets. If they don't treat us with respect that we demand, we'll tow their car. All that stuff, right? Totally inappropriate. Unconditional positive regard, unconditional respect dictates that I do not behave that way. I have a standard that I adhere to. My mindset, unconditional respect, is a manifestation of that outward mindset of seeing people as people.
Awesome.
Well, the hard part about this is, gentlemen, people think it's soft.
Right.
People think it's soft. If I'm seeing you as a human being, the last thing I'm going to do is lower my guard.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm going to do is lower my guard.
And isn't it the ultimate in officer safety and tactics?
In my mind, it is. Of course,
Yeah.
I'm biased, right? My bias. I mean, I've dedicated my life to this, and this philosophy has saved my life. I'm married to the best person you've ever met. You know, I've got great relationships professionally and personally. I have the last half of my career was so fulfilling, and I had so many opportunities gifted to me because of this perspective shift, this fundamental shift in my way of seeing. I'm all in, but I need to be convinced. If I'm objectifying you, if I'm seeing you as less than human, then every observation I make that's predicated on that false assumption is flawed, significantly flawed, because it's made based in a virtual reality that only exists in my head, a reality in which you aren't a person. And so it's so important that we recognize that. The message is like when you read Arbinger's work, the material, the philosophy, it's unafraid, right? It's unafraid. I'm the weak link. It's my inability to explain it to people in a way that actually lets them entertain the thought, like, wow, there might be something here. There might be something here. I'm the weak link because it's hard for me to explain it in the right way to make it accessible for them. I know I understand it, but I need to be able to reach other people. And the only way I found to do that effectively is to model it, to simply be the type of person I'm asking them to consider being. And again, I'm a flawed human being. So I've also gotten really good at apologizing. When I drop the ball, when I don't live up to my own expectations, But yeah, it's fundamentally for me, it's everything. If I get that wrong, it doesn't matter how good I am, what kind of shape I'm in, how good of a shot I am. Everything else goes out the window. It's less than fully effective because of my flawed perception.
Yeah. So something you just said there, and I know we're coming to the top of the hour, and we want to keep these within this, but I've got to ask. So, you just said this is really hard, and I couldn't agree more. I think we all are bought into the concept, and I think to some degree, through examples from great coaches, yourself included, try to live up to that. But out there, inevitably, I mean, we all travel around to different agencies and deal with folks. They're fighting in a 360-degree battle to do exactly what you just said, to model the way, to be the example. And what I always liken this to is, the insecure dog within a pack that goes after the big dogs and gets everybody else ramped up. How do we maybe get that mindset to shift? If I want to be the example, what advice would you give? I'm hearing everything you're saying. How do I start tomorrow? I go to work. What do I do differently than I'm doing today?
So you'll probably see you guys have a link scrolling across the bottom of the screen there, www.arbinger.com/ILEETA. What I've done there is we have packed that full of tools, articles, resources, things that people can take a look at that will help answer that question. What do I do? What do I do? People are always interested in that. I'm not an expert on what to do all the time. I think the people listening are generally experts on what to do. I am an expert on how we show up with people in what we do. I will tell you that it comes down to grounding yourself, being humble, being able to admit when you're wrong, and just sharing with people the journey you're on. Just showing up with people and saying, look, I'm trying to make a change here that I think is going to be fundamentally, it's going to make all the difference in the world. It's a change in myself. It's a change in the way that I am with other people in the world. It's the thing that's going to help buttress my resolve to build these relationships. It's also going to put me in the gym. I'm not going to be skipping my training because I know other people are depending on me. I'm not going to be not going to the range when I should because I know other people are depending on me to be as good as I can possibly be in those situations. I just simply have to, and I know it's in all these leadership books, model this way of being. It doesn't mean be perfect. It just means be able to own your flaws, own your mistakes, invite people along on the journey. There's no finish line to this. We have tools, we have resources, we have training, we have all these workshops where we share with people tools. We say, listen, these tools are kind of like forcing functions. They help channel me into this mindset, especially when I'm just starting out. Like, how do I show up when I'm trying to mentor somebody on the police department? What steps should I take to manifest this mindset in that mentoring process? How do I show up when it comes to performance review? How do I show up to reporting up to my boss, holding myself accountable for the impact I have? We have tools throughout the training that actually help people get their arms around that tactically. But again, the most important piece of this is just understanding that I've got to recognize I'm a person too. I'm a human being. I'm part of the equation, and I'm going to slip. I'm going to trip. And probably the biggest gift I could give everyone listening is this. This is what worked for me. It's worked for a lot of other people. I intentionally surrounded myself with people who loved me and were willing to give me courageous feedback when I slipped. They were willing to pull me aside, look me in the eye, and say, Chip, I love you, brother, but you're not living your values. In this example here, the way you snapped at your stepson, that's not the you claim to want to be. And I'm going to give you that feedback because I know you want it. And if you can surround yourself with people that care about you that much, they'll give you that buddy check when you need it. It's like having a workout partner. Everybody that's ever had a workout partner knows, if you've agreed to be at the gym at the weight pile at 5 in the morning and you got a workout partner, you're much more likely to be there, right? You probably want to show up before him or her. But if it's just you left to my own devices, like no one's going to know if I eat this whole cheesecake, I'm probably diving in with 2 forks. So that system of accountability you build around yourself is critical when you're trying to pursue this mindset shift we're talking about, at least in my estimation.
Awesome. Yep.
Chip, you just said that L word, and I don't remember, it was a podcast. I don't remember which podcast it was, but you said we need to say love more often to one another. Yeah. And that kind of resonated with me. And in this macho world of law enforcement, it's hard to do that. But I've been more intentional about using that L word with just everybody as much as I can.
I left Bob Evans and Brian the other day in the weight pile. These guys have moved on from SWAT. They're in other areas of the department now. Love you too, Chip. Love you, brother. Love you. And the younger people in the gym are kind of like, huh. We say it openly to one another. You all know my brothers. All in law enforcement, we say it openly to one another. It's not a soft thing. If you've ever really loved, it's one of the most difficult things in the world to do. If you've ever really cared about someone enough that you regarded them fully and you wanted to see them suffer less and you were willing to sacrifice to make that happen, that's what love is. Love's not some emotion, some soft feeling. That's like hormones. That's like endorphins, right? That stuff doesn't last. Love is being there for people, holding them after they've had to use deadly force, sitting in that patrol car with them when they feel all alone and isolated. Loving is stepping up and saying, look, I care deeply about you. I'm not going to let you cheat on your overtime. I'm not going to let you violate your own values. Loving and caring about people is really difficult. But it's the only thing, the most important, most powerful force in the universe, as far as I could tell. Why would powerful people not want to leverage that? It's beyond me.
Todd,
it's one knowledge bomb after another. This has been absolutely enlightening, insightful, interesting. This has been a great hour. I want to thank you for coming on with us. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done and that you're going to continue to do in the future. And I look forward to seeing you next March once again.
Oh, man, look, I really want to be there. I miss you guys. I always love the camaraderie. That week is special to me and my family. You guys know that. And the work you're doing for law enforcement, thank you so much. ILEETA is the premier training organization in the world when it comes to law enforcement. Anybody listening that hasn't been to ILEETA conference, you need to get there. As a matter of fact, the first 3 people that agree to go, these guys are going to send me the bill for your membership. So the first 3 people listening to this, agree to join ILEETA. These gentlemen are going to send me the bill for your first year's membership.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to say 209 days until the ILEETA conference. That's how good this is. We're counting down. Counting down.
I'm sorry about the technical issues, by the way. That's never happened to me either, but I guess we just got to learn to adapt.
Yeah.
No, this was an example of it, right? Like that adaptation thing. I mean, you were back up and running quick, and I don't know how the heck you did it to get your photo to freeze the way it did. I want to know the secret because that'll never happen for me.
Well, in the interest of authenticity and transparency, it's called blind luck.
Well, hey, we're right at the top of the hour. I just want to wrap this up. On behalf of ILEETA, myself, Todd, Joe, we thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It was a powerful hour of great knowledge that you imparted on us, and I really want to express our gratitude for you to share your time with us and our ILEETA family here.
Brian, thank you. Todd, Joe, thank you guys so much. And Brian, I'm serious. Email me the bill for those memberships whenever they come rolling in. I know they're going to roll in.
All right,
Awesome.
we'll do that.
Okay,
All
brother.
right. Hang on for a second here. Let me go ahead and cut this off. Everybody that's watching this tonight, you have just about a month to get your ILEETA proposals in. October 31st. September 10th is when the ILEETA journal articles are due. So we look forward to reading some new authors writing some great information for our ILEETA members. And just like Chip said, if you're not an ILEETA member, www.ileeta.org. Go and join our organization, and we can't wait to see you in March. See you all next month.